What happens when a network tries to turn the computer boom into a teen adventure series, then ends up with criticism, backstage problems, and a time slot that did it no favors? Out of a producer fighting for a job and a simple pitch to remake the spirit of the Hardy Boys, a strange idea took shape about a group of teenagers solving crimes with a computer. So what happened behind the scenes? Let's find out. This is the history of Whiz Kids. The idea for the show started with Bob Shane having a bad day at work. At the time, he was trying to secure a producer role on Simon & Simon. A slot seemed to open when another producer moved off the show. Shane pushed for it, but when executive producer Philip de Geer went to Richard Chapman to bring him in, Chapman's answer, according to Shane, was simple. If Shane came on as a producer, Chapman would quit. So instead of fighting it, he decided to do something else. If he couldn't get the role he wanted, he would just invent another show. The idea became Whiz Kids. The timing made sense from a business angle too. In the early 80s, 60 Minutes dominated Sunday nights. It was usually the #1 show of the week and almost always sat inside the top 10. Rival networks kept throwing expensive adventure shows against it, and those shows kept on getting destroyed in the ratings. For example, NBC had Voyagers in that slot, and it struggled really bad. So Shane saw an opening, put the news series opposite 60 Minutes, adults would watch the news show, and kids and teenagers would watch his new idea. The initial concept came from the Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew, which ABC had aired in that same hour. The network cancelled it because the ratings were not strong enough, but the replacements that followed actually performed a lot worse, and ABC quietly regretted cancelling the earlier show. Shane and de Geer went to the president of Universal Television at the time, Robert Harris, who Shane knew from earlier work producing the Los Angeles version of the AM show. The pitch was simple. Let's do the spirit of the Hardy Boys, but do it right. Not literally remaking the characters, but build a mystery adventure series about teenagers solving crimes. De Geer added a twist. Let's give them a computer. That one idea locked the whole concept together. Harris liked it immediately and told them to write a pilot. The studio was so confident in the pitch that they paid for the pilot script themselves before the show was even offered to a network. They believed that the show would easily sell to either ABC or NBC. Shane was more than happy if the series went to either, as long as it didn't go to CBS. But that plan collapsed very soon. Someone at Universal mentioned the script to CBS, and the network wanted to read it. Shane begged the studio not to send it, as CBS already had 60 Minutes, so they would never schedule the show in the one time slot that he believed it could succeed. But the studio sent the script anyway. CBS liked it and bought the series. So the show eventually would center on a teenage computer genius named Richie Adler. He builds a homemade computer system called Ralph using old equipment his father sent to him. With help from his friends Ham Parker, Jeremy Saladino, and Alice Tyler, he uses the machine to investigate crimes. With all that in place, next was the casting. Bob Shane had one rule that immediately made life harder for the production. He insisted on using real-life teenagers. That sounds okay, nothing wrong with being authentic, but that also meant dealing with child labor laws, school schedules, and strict limits on how long the actors could work each day. The lead role of Richie Adler went to Matthew Laborteur. He was already known from Little House on the Prairie, and he had one other major advantage over other candidates. He already finished high school with a GED and was 16 or older. That meant he was not restricted to the same child work rules as the other kids. Now the rest of the core group came together with much less experience. Todd Porter was cast as Ham Parker, Jeffrey Jacquet joined as Jeremy Saladino, and Andrea Elson was cast as Alice Tyler. 2 adult authority figures were added to the ongoing series to provide supervision and moral boundaries. Max Gale joined as reporter Llewellyn Farley, and Adolphe Martinez joined as Lieutenant Quinn. There was also one casting decision that never happened, and it bothered Shane for years. Before Whiz Kids, he had worked as a story editor on 8 Is Enough. During that time, he once had to pick up a young actor from the airport who had been hired for the show. Shane remembered the drive to the airport clearly. The teenager seemed tough and confident, and very different from the rest of the cast. Years later, when Whiz Kids began casting, Shane found the same actor in the Screen Actors Guild photo book. He showed the picture to his boss and said he should audition for Ham. The problem was the photo. According to Shane, the headshot had the actor's hair hung all the way down to his shoulders. So the response from the boss was really blunt. He said, "Not unless Ham is a girl," and the audition never happened. The actor, according to Shane, was Ralph Macchio. So within a couple of years, he became one of the most recognizable young actors in the country after starring in The Karate Kid. Shane later believed if he had been cast, the extra star power might have helped keep the show on the air a bit longer. Now, the music on the show leaned heavily into the idea that computers were the future, but the show's soundtrack didn't rely only on electronic sounds. The opening theme used an arrangement from Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart's Piano Concerto No. 21 in C major, specifically the first movement. That melody became the foundation of the show's title sequence, with a faster, more energetic arrangement designed to match the computer-driven visuals of the intro. Other classical pieces continued to appear throughout the series. The overture from Rossini's The Barber of Seville showed up multiple times in the background music. In another episode, the love theme from Tchaikovsky's Romeo and Juliet was used to underline one of Ritchie's romantic storylines. Alongside the classical material, the show also used original scoring that leaned towards electronic sounds. The combination created a strange but fitting mix, which in a way matched the show itself. Once the show went into production, things did not exactly glide along like a perfectly written mystery episode. The pilot ran over schedule by at least a week. What started as a $2 million production ended up closer to $4 million by the time filming wrapped. Then there was the technology problem. The entire premise of the show depended on computers. Unfortunately, computers in the early 80s did not exactly cooperate with television cameras. Film ran at 24 frames per second. The computers operated closer to 30. That meant the screens often flickered or failed to display properly when filmed. The crew constantly fought with the monitors trying to make the text visible on camera. One of the key specialists involved with the production was David Gunn, who worked on the software and systems used to generate the speech synthesis and the commands that appeared on the monitors. Even with that help, the crew spent large chunks of time waiting for computers to behave properly during filming. The writing staff had its own share of chaos. One example came from a script assignment given to writer Arthur Weingarten. He pitched a story, turned it into an outline, and was approved to write the full script. But then the script vanished. For weeks, he kept telling the production team the script was almost finished. Then he said it had already been sent to a Xerox store for pickup. Bob Shane went looking for it. The production staff visited several different copy shops based on Weingarten's instructions, but none of them had any idea what they were talking about. Eventually, the production team concluded the obvious: the script was never written. Then, internal conflicts escalated. The show never ran smoothly behind the scenes, and the tensions between Shane and De Geer kept getting worse as the production continued. Universal brought in veteran producer Jack Laird, known for Night Gallery, to help stabilize the situation and keep the series on schedule. When he wrote a script for the show, according to Shane, it was totally unusable. Then one day, the situation exploded. Philip De Geer fired Jack Laird, and Joe Gannon attempted to demote Bob Shane, but Shane refused. Instead of accepting the demotion, he quit the show. With the production team now fractured, the show moved forward without one of its original creators and its entire writing staff. When the show finally premiered on CBS in 1983, the reaction arrived quickly. First, the complaints started piling up in the newspapers. A Chicago Tribune critic looked at the pilot and basically asked one question: why are kids being shown illegally accessing computer systems belonging to schools, newspapers, and government offices? Her answer was, instead of the show being appealing, it felt appalling. New York Times critic John J. O'Connor took a similar view. He described the series as a kiddie adventure show that probably belonged on Saturday mornings instead of prime time. In his view, the mystery stretched credibility, especially once computers started opening doors into every database in Southern California. The Associated Press went even further. They argued the show might actually be more dangerous than anything else on television that season. Another critic called the show one of the most disturbing news shows of the season because it turned illegal acts into heroic behavior, and those concerns kept on coming back. Meanwhile, the audience reaction told a slightly different story. Teenagers and kids liked it, and the new show pushed the actors into teen magazine territory. The show even done a crossover with another series because executive producer Philip DeGeer also ran the detective series Simon and Simon. But the ratings told a more complicated story. At first, the ratings were kind of respectable. There were numbers in the low double digits. Nothing huge, but not a disaster either. But then, the audience started slipping. Eventually, the ratings dropped into single digits. So CBS responded the way networks usually respond when they start to panic. They moved the show. So mid-season, Whiz Kids was shifted from Wednesday nights to Saturday evenings. The younger audience the network hoped to attract never fully followed the show to the new night, and at that point, the writing was already on the wall. But the final decision was not announced yet. After 13 episodes, CBS quietly removed the series from its regular schedule. 5 completed episodes were still sitting on the shelf though, but rather than put the show back into a proper weekly time slot, they decided to scatter those final episodes across the following months. They appeared sporadically through the spring with no consistent scheduling and no real push to bring the viewers back. The final episode eventually aired on June 2nd, 1984. After the original run ended, the show never received a domestic home video release. No videos during the 80s, no DVD rollout during the 2000s, nothing, just nothing. Now the series is owned by Universal, and for whatever reason, the company has shown very little interest in releasing it on DVD. And then there was the 2008 fire that destroyed part of the Universal Studios backlot, including a building known as the Video Vault. Universal estimated that between 40 and 50,000 videotapes were destroyed in that fire. Universal has stated that original film elements for many productions were stored elsewhere in more secure facilities. Whether Whiz Kids was affected directly by that loss has never been fully clarified. Now, the only official home media release to appear anywhere came in 2016 when a French company released the series on DVD. But even that release came with a catch. The French set only included the 13 out of the 18 episodes, as the final 5 were never broadcast in France. As a result, the DVD set simply left them out. Now, after the show ended, it didn't totally disappear. Years later, it popped up in an unexpected place. Episodes of Whiz Kids could be seen playing on Mexican television during the second season of the HBO comedy Eastbound and Down. But when it came to expanding the original series, nothing has followed. There's been no spin-offs, no sequel series, no reunion movies, just that single season that remained the entire run. Still, the core idea of the show remained interesting in hindsight. A group of teenagers solving crimes with a homemade computer sounded unusual back in 1983. But as personal computers, the internet, and digital investigations became normal parts of everyday life, the basic concept of young people using technology to uncover information no longer felt strange. In that sense, the premise that once looked futuristic slowly became ordinary. Thanks for watching, please like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.